Those people that relied heavily on Airbnb or VRBO being the two most popular, you're in trouble. Yeah, it is a bust for those of you that have no freaking idea what you're doing.
I feel like the days of that are like coming to an end.
No, not coming to an end. They came to an end.
Okay. Fernando, I know you're the resident Airbnb short-term rental specialist, right? And you have something that almost nobody that I know does, which is direct access to real data. Because not only do you manage a very large pool of short-term rentals for clients, you also personally own a meaningful amount of short-term rentals. So you can see what's actually happening in the market in real time, which is a huge competitive advantage, because you need an accurate assessment of reality in order to produce a good outcome. And you have that assessment. So people have been asking me all the time, like, what's going on in the short-term rental market? I'm like, we got to get Fernando. So tell us what you're seeing in the data.
Okay, so, there's a lot to unravel here, but I'm going to talk, just for sake of time, I'm going to talk specifically about regions, right? A lot of people, especially the people that recently got into the game, for me, recently meaning people that got into the Airbnb game within the last 2 years, have a not a true sense of what the short-term rental business is, because the last 2 years have been an anomaly. Those of you, and I'm going to reference this or compare it to the real estate market. The real estate market has been hot. You didn't need any skills to make money in the real estate market in the last couple of years. But today, skill is a necessity. In the short-term rental game, it's the same, right? In the last couple of years, you can put anything on Airbnb and you were going to be successful. It really didn't matter. Today, it matters. And what matters most is not only skill, but data. And data and every company will kill for data. Our company is the same, right? Those people that relied heavily on just one or two platforms, Airbnb or VRBO being the two most popular, you're in trouble. And more importantly, if you didn't take the time to understand your market, you're in big trouble right now. You're losing money because Airbnb is no longer focused on the host. They're focused on the guest. So having that data or that experience, right? We've been in this game for a long time. So having the experience to know what market or who to market to is extremely important today.
So the couple things I'm hearing from you. Number one is that anybody who got into the game from 2020, like onward, they don't have an accurate assessment of reality as far as like what the short-term rental game is about, because anything they did worked. So people can confuse luck with skill.
Correct.
The second thing I'm hearing from you is that in the short-term rental game, just like in the residential resale game, that when times get tough, only the skilled get paid.
Yep.
And the skills that are required in the short-term rental game, number one, is operational excellence, like being a great operator, right? And not solely relying on, platforms in order to do all the marketing for you and things of that nature. And then the second is having access to actual data so you can see how things are changing. And then the third thing I wrote down is this major shift, because I read a book called Machines, Platforms, and Crowds that helped me to understand platforms well. And platforms are really about bringing together two people, like a buyer and a seller, or in this instance, like a host and a tenant.
Correct.
And what we're experiencing right now is that the hosts are less valuable than the tenant because there are so many of them, and the platform is no longer optimizing for that side of the equation. They're optimizing for the tenant side of the equation. So if you don't have mechanisms in place for doing your own types of marketing, whether that be social media, whether that be something to drive traffic to your own site, you are experiencing pain at the moment. Is that right?
100%. Great assessment. This Airbnb bust myth that's been going on throughout social media and these quote unquote influencers that got into the short-term rental game that are claiming that they're losing money. This, Airbnb is a bust now. Yeah, it is a bust for those of you that have no freaking idea what you're doing. But for those of you with the skills and with the, and more importantly, those of you that have data that drives you, systems that drive you, and processes that drive you, you're going to be fine.
Yeah,
But
you'll be
those that
absolutely
don't,
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the same when you go back to the residential resale side, like people who have the skill, they know how to prospect, they know how to pre-qualify, they know how to go on appointments, they know how to handle objections and close. Not only will they be fine, but in an environment like this, there's opportunity. And I'm imagining what we're going to see over the next 6 months is a lot of those operators who don't have the systems, who don't have the processes, who don't have the data, because no longer is it profitable, they're going to have to put their properties on the market and sell them. And for people who understand and have those things in place, that's a huge opportunity for them, right? During COVID, people wanted to be in the middle of nowhere. They didn't want to be around anybody, right? And that worked, and you could buy anything in the middle of nowhere, a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and you'd probably do well. And what we're seeing now is that humans' behavior is changing. That is no longer the case. And those people's bookings are going down dramatically. Is that what you're seeing?
Right. The mountains of North Carolina were extremely popular, in 2020 and 2021. Everybody wanted to get away. They wanted to, and people couldn't, a lot of people, and to a certain extent, some still are, were working remote, right? You're not allowed to go to the office anymore. So they were taking advantage, and they were going to these remote places. And people were started, they were being sold this idea that, hey, buy this property because you're going to be able to make X. And they were showing the numbers. For example, in 2021, realtors were showing what the numbers, their short-term rental income was for 2020. And in 2021, it was still good. But in 2022, those are the people that I said are hurting because they thought that what was happening in 2020 and what was happening in 2021 was going to continue. And clearly that is not the case today.
In fact, we were having conversations with someone and they were sending me those types of properties. And you said to me, like, yeah, like they're partially right. like the vehicle, this is a good vehicle. What's happening though is that if you look at like occupancy rates and kind of income for 2022, you will see even in, towards the end of the year or even like 6 months in, that dramatically is different than what was happening in 2021. So therefore, the prices that these people are asking for properties are not in alignment with what's actually true.
But more importantly, here's what people need to understand. Airbnb is constantly promoting and saying that the ARV, which is the average daily rates, have increased 100%. That have increased now. Since, in the past couple of years, they're steadily increasing. But the question is, are they increasing enough to cover inflation and to cover purchase price of the property? And they're not, right? Occupancy rates are the same. The ARV is a little higher, but it's not covering the gap between inflation and your purchase price.
Now, the other thing I think was interesting is I asked you a question about, and this came down to data too, like about these properties that are like, big and have all these amenities and all that other stuff. And this goes down to operation as well. And you were like, like what I'm seeing experientially is that if you think about the end user, there's a lot fewer of those people walking around who can spend that amount per night than there are for something that's closer to the equator. And in fact, due to that supply and demand difference, there's a lower supply of that type of tenant and an enormous supply of those types of properties for them to choose from.
Correct.
And as such, you would people think like, oh, I need to buy this like big thing. And you're like, that's not what we're seeing in the data.
There's not enough people that are going to pay for that in order for you to get a return on that money that's going to cost you to purchase that. So ideally, and you can look at the history of Airbnb or short-term rentals, because remember, this is another thing that people need to understand. Short-term rentals have been around way longer than Airbnb has. I mean, I remember as a kid renting a house to go on vacation, right? So that part has always been around. And you got to look at what the bread and butter of the short-term rental industry is. Today, here's who we market to. And again, it depends on where we're managing the property. Depends on, because we know our guest. We know who we're going to market to as our primary, and then there's the secondaries, what we refer to. So, for example, South Florida being South Florida, we market to vacationers, right? We market to families, but today it's smaller families. We don't have families with 5 or 6 kids anymore. We have families with 1 or 2 kids. So you need, at the biggest, it's a 3-bedroom, right? And then the other target for us, now that South Florida has become a financial hub, an attraction to business, we target to business travelers, right? A business traveler doesn't need a 4-bedroom house, but they could stay in a 2-bedroom house or even a 3-bedroom house if the price is right. But when I'm looking to invest in a property, I'm looking for a 3-2 or a small 3-2 or a 2-2. That's what I'm looking for, right? I can still do a 2-1 or a multi-unit property that has studios and 1-bedrooms.
What people do is they don't really think about this like a business.
No.
It's like they're thinking about this as like HGTV and, oh my God, I love this property and it's so nice and and maybe I can use it. And it's like, nah, man, like you're thinking wrong. You need to be thinking about this as a business. What is the most optimal and efficient way? And also cater to who is more likely than not going to be the user of it. If you could share, like, what are the differences in operations between 2020, 2021, and 2022? Like, what are the changes that you guys are seeing and or making for clients to ensure that they still are successful in this market?
So there's a couple of things that we changed and aggressively doing. So a lot of people miss out on 2 big markets. One being corporate leasing, and then one being catering to the nomad community. The nomad community is a huge community, and they're loyalist. You know, they're the nomad community. If you get into their world, not only will they stay in your place for 3 or 4 months at a time, but they will recommend you and talk about you, because most of them are in this world, and they're going to pass your information on. So I focus and I get on their channels, I get on their message boards, and I cater to that nomad community. So in terms of amenities, for example, there's a couple of key things that you must have regardless of who your client is, because it's a necessity today. So for example, and I still see hosts make this mistake. One is high-speed internet. It's a must, people. If you're in this game and you don't have high-speed internet, get out of the game. Who is today's babysitter? That's my question. They're like, well, what do you mean? This is today's babysitter. This and or this. Right? Mom and dad don't want to be bothered, and they give the kid the phone and they give the kid an iPad so they can sit on a corner and just do this all day, right? But you need internet for that, and you need high-speed internet for that, because everyone in that room is going to be connected to that internet. The second amenity that you must have is a well-planned out coffee station. With tea, with your espresso machine. So you're catering to the same type of people. So why don't you have it? And I tell people all the time, it doesn't cost much. Your ROI on that coffee station is tremendous because it doesn't cost you that much to create. And then the last amenity that I tell people all the time, for today anyways, especially if you're in an area where you're going to get someone that comes to your property to most likely do some type of work, and that's having a desk or a workstation. Those are the three big amenities that I tell every client that I have that you must have it in your property if you want to get a high return on your investment.
Here you are. What most people do is they're being overly dependent on platforms to give them customers.
Correct.
And what that means, though, is that the moment that they decide to do something different, you're toast. Like they have all of the leverage. And what you're doing is you're collecting all data from everybody who's staying, and then you're marketing to them, which is like super intelligent. So that leads me to my next question is like, do you think, because what I'm aware of as we're having this conversation, like, I feel like if you're going to do this, you either need to dedicate your time, blood, sweat, and tears like you have to really becoming a master of the craft, or you need to hire somebody like you. And 100%. I think a lot of people have been just like, oh, it's like a mom and pop, it's like a little side hustle. And I see these things are like, oh yeah, you could just like monitor everything. You set up your little apps and it's easy. And I just do it myself. I feel like the days of that are like coming to an end.
No, they're not coming to an end. They came to an end. They're done.
Okay. Yeah. They're done. It's kind of like done. Sellers in 2020 or 2021 are like, yeah, I don't need you. I just put on the market. Like, yeah, it's true. Okay. You sell right away. Now they need you.
Same thing. That's why I always compare the short-term rental industry with real estate agents, because we follow the same market, meaning the same trends. And in 2020, I didn't really need an agent. I could put my house on, for sale by owner, and somebody's going to buy it. But in 2023, good luck.
That's exactly right. Good luck with that. And with agents, like, they could make a meaningful amount of money in 2020, 2021, just show up, don't say anything stupid, like wear flip-flops and sandals, and like, okay, you'll make a little bit of money. But that is not the case anymore. And what it makes me think about is like what Warren Buffett said is when the tide goes out, you could see who's wearing pants or not.
100%. The other thing that I always took away from Warren Buffett too is that everyone's saying buy, buy, buy. That's when you need to be reserved. When everyone's saying sell, sell, sell is when you need to double down. That's
what's happening now. Right? Which is like, oh, like people are starting, there's this disruption. And now's the time, if you've been interested in perhaps getting into the short-term rental game as an investor, where now's the time to either make a decision that you're going to be a world-class operator and like, dedicate all your time and energy and effort, because that's what it requires. Or B, find an operational partner like yourself who has operational excellence and literally do whatever they tell you to do. The other question I wanted to ask you is from that. So like attract, convert, deliver. You kind of mentioned that, right? There's attraction mechanisms, and people were overly dependent on platforms as an attraction mechanism.
Right.
And then there's conversion, like how do you convert those into like, kind of bookings? Then there's delivery. How are we delivering on the promise? How are we, by having these amenities like high-speed internet? So as far as that, like, attraction mechanism, can you speak really kind of briefly about what are some of the things that you guys are doing that is required in this environment that wasn't required before? We mentioned one, like actually marketing to people that have already stayed. I know that you're big on social and you travel a lot, and you've noticed that that's actually become a mechanism for people not only finding you, but then leading to bookings. Is that right?
That's correct. And the other thing as a short-term rental operator, for me, when I travel, number one, I love to travel. So that's again, and that's why I got into this industry as well. When you travel and you stay in other people's short-term rentals, you get to see firsthand what the guest experience is. And then you can recognize that this was a phenomenal experience, or man, this sucked, right? And you can take that and implement that to your business.
What I'm hearing from you is by traveling, because I know you do that, I'm always messing with you, like where in the world is Fernando David? He's all over the place. But what you're actually doing, not only are you traveling and getting the benefits of travel, it's actually a form of data collection where you're like experiencing what it's like to be a, kind of booking and to experience what it's like to travel to these places and to stay in either short-term rentals or hotels or things of that nature. And you're gathering the experience as the consumer, which allows you to think like the consumer. And that's why when you're saying these things like, yeah, dude, I need this, this, and this, I know that's what Fernando needs. He needs high-speed internet. He needs some coffee and some tea, and he needs a desk to do work, because he's going to be using all those things while he's there.
One of the things that we do, that hotels do the same thing, people may not even notice, stores, the department stores, some do as well, is the sense of smell, right? Each one has a specific smell to them. So if you go to any one of my properties, you're gonna that smell that when you walk in, it's recognizable. You may not subconsciously, you're not gonna know that, but you're gonna know that, okay, yeah, this is a Fernando David property. Because that smell is the same smell in every property I have. We put the same lavender smell.
That's so smart. Like what it makes me think about is that these major hotel chains actually sell their scent.
Scent, yes.
And they also sell the pillowcases that they use
Yes.
and the blankets
And
that
those
they
sheets.
use.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I never would have thought about that, Fernando, but the pillows and the blankets and the sheets are tactile,
Yep.
touch.
Yep.
The spritz is the smell, right?
With our app. So the way our process works is once you book with us, you get an email from us saying, thank you for booking with us. To get all your check-in instructions or the home instructions, download this app. So once they download that app, all that information on that property is there. So let's say they get into the property and they want to know how to work the TV. They hit the TV icon, and the video pops up on how to use that TV and how to use the remote control. So it gives them that what people used to use as a guest book in a digital form. But more importantly for me, we use it for upsales. So if they want to buy something, they can buy it. If they want to know what the best restaurants that we recommend, it's going to be there. In addition to that, like I mentioned to you before, we created our own insurance company. So I don't rely on Airbnb if a guest damages something, I don't have to apply and request and tell Airbnb, listen, it's the guest's fault, please pay me. No, I have my own policy that the guests have to buy. And I take care of my own problems. But it's also a way to give that guest a more worry-free experience because they know all they do is give me $35 and they don't have to worry about if anything breaks because I'm not going to complain.
I love it, man. Listen, I don't know anybody who has this more dialed in than you do. And what I'm aware of is you have definitely made a commitment. Like you've been world-class in everything you did. You're world-class in this particular space. And people would benefit greatly by just having a conversation to get in proximity to you if they own something and they're thinking about it. So how could they find you if they want to have a conversation with you with regards to your services?
I'm on all platforms. You can find me through Fernando at PMI Premium Services. And PMIPremiumServices.com is my website.
Yeah, awesome. Listen, he's the real deal. He's as good as it gets. It's a privilege and a pleasure to know you. I'm super proud to be in business with you via EXP and the platform. And I appreciate you, brother. I look forward to reconnecting soon.
All right, brother. Thank you. Peace.